Kate Falcha, welcome to Irish Granny Helen, and I have a little treat for everybody. Let me fix this. All I can see is my forehead. There we go. As you know, I've been kind of repurposing my channel a little bit just because of, the world. And one of the things I thought would be really kind of entertaining to do, because I'm a bit obsessed myself with the general topic, is true crime. And Denise Siegel and I were doing a podcast, Psychics and Psychos, and it was going great guns. We were having a wonderful time. And then the platform went kaput, and the new substitute platform, they all wanted us to pay in order to do our podcast. And, we decided that wasn't the direction we wanted to go in. But I've been sitting on this research that I did back then, almost a year ago, knowing that I would find some great use for it. So I think once every week or so, I'm going to try to cover an interesting crime. And there are a few out there that are very, very popular, is kind of a iffy word to use, but people are interested in, enormously interested in. And then there are a few that are very controversial, and I picked this one because it's controversial. When it first happened, and then a book came out about it, I read the book, and I didn't know what to make. I didn't know what to think. I wasn't as maybe educated then, because this is a few decades ago, as I am now about social pressure and how it affects the justice system. And that makes a big difference in this case. So I don't know how long this is going to take. I may have to divide this into 2 videos. But I hope you'll stick around to the end, because after I researched it from a number of different sites, all on the internet, there's nothing sketchy about them, just different news sites and Wikipedia, and then some other places. I can't remember where I got them. I know, probably YouTube. I also stumbled on a very long 3-hour video by a YouTuber who's a lawyer who did a very deep dive and had some quite revealing things to say about this case. And then a guy I love, I love his delivery. It's just great. Dr. Grande. Dr. Grande is some sort of psychotherapist, and he talks about famous cases people send in. Can you, figure this person out for us? And he always says, I'm not diagnosing anybody, but this is my opinion in a case that would be like this. It's a great way to get around it. So he will be our final word on this, because I respect him. I don't always agree with him, but I respect him. And I think you're going to find his conclusions very interesting. So I'm talking about the case of Darlie Routier. Now, for years and years, I never heard it said out loud because, no internet. I read books about it, and I thought it was Routier. That's how it's spelled. And I have that embedded in my head. So I'm just warning you that if I say it Routier, it's because I'm not being precious. It's because that's what I thought it was years ago. So this is a very interesting case. It's either tragic, horrible, or tragic, really sad, or both. I don't know. It's very hard to characterize it. And I will warn you ahead of time, this is about the murder of 2 children. And we're not getting into gory details having to do with that part of it. This is about what came before and the investigation after, and it's truly a mystery. So Darlie Lynn was born January 4th, 1970 in Altoona, Pennsylvania. She had 2 sisters, one of whom is Danielle, who figures in the story, and two stepsisters. The whole family moved to Lubbock, Texas when she was a teenager, her mother and stepfather. Her mother worked at the Western Sizzlin' restaurant. And Darlie would hang out there. And when Darlie was 15, she met one of the cooks at the restaurant, Darlie Routier, who was 17. He was working and going to tech school. There are some sketchy things about things that happened to her as a teenager, and I'm going to be hinting around the edges of this because there are certain words that we're not supposed to say on YouTube. It gets us into trouble. So I'm hoping that people will understand about what I am hinting. So she made allegations of SA at a party, and there was common gossip at the time that it was attention setting to catch the attention of Darren, to get him to notice her. She was looking for that. They got married in August of 1988. She was 18 and had just graduated from high school. He was 21 and had just graduated from the technical school. He started a small electrical component testing company. Who knew that was a thing? And he was actually very successful. They were big spenders, young people with too much money to burn, basically. They bought a big house in Rowlett, an affluent suburb of Dallas. They spent thousands renovating this place. In 1982, he had bought a Jaguar. Then he bought a 30-foot cabin cruiser. She got breast implants, and these things seem unimportant, but they all play into the case later. She got breast implants, and she used to wear a ton of really flashy jewelry. You can see photographs of her. They eventually had 3 little boys. Devin Rush, born June 14th, 1989, when Darlie was 19. Damon Christian, born February 19th, 1991, when she was 21. And Drake, born October 18th, 1995. She was 25. With Drake, she had severe postpartum depression. She had mood swings, rages. She slept a lot when she could. The neighbors complained that she spent a lot of money on clothes and her appearance, but she would leave the kids alone. Now, I will put a caveat out there. The rumor mill. There were rumors about her and no evidence to back up the rumors. The rumors about, oh, look at how she dresses. Oh, look at her big breasts. Oh, look at all the jewelry. Oh, look at the fancy car. And you get the sense that there was an element of jealousy and judgment, because this was a very conservative Christian area. Really, they appeared to be the perfect model family. She really was home all the time with the children, and they appeared well taken care of. She baked cookies for all the neighborhood kids. They helped a cancer patient that they knew. They helped to pay his mortgage. But they were living beyond their means. They were having a great old time, and this may not have been really known to others. Other people may not have been fully aware. What they were seeing was ostentation. What was going on in the background was personal debt. Business began to operate at a loss, and Darren made an application for a loan that was rejected. They were behind in their mortgage. They owed $10,000 in taxes, and they owed $12,000 in credit cards, and there was stress in the marriage. It is alleged that she wrote an apology of a self-harm note to her boys in her diary about a month before the crime we're going to talk about, begging their forgiveness and saying that it wasn't their fault. These allegations of the debt that they were in and the difficulty that presented in their lives, is refuted later. So I still don't know what to think, and I'm still not taking sides, but I think that I'm going to point out areas that are contested as we go along. If I remember them, it's been a year since I've looked at this. So June 16th, 1996, at 2:31 in the morning, there was a 911 call, and Darlie, quite upset, tells the operator that there was an intruder who has stabbed her 2 children and her, and the youngest child is upstairs with the dad. She says she awoke while being stabbed. She being stabbed. She was asleep on the couch. She struggled with the guy and he fled. So the police arrived as Darren was rushing outside to go across the street to the neighbor who was an RN to get help from the neighbor. Darlie was still on the phone with 911 and she was very seriously injured. One of the boys was already dead, the other was dying. Darren ran back into the house. He began doing CPR. And in the process of trying to resuscitate these children and stem her bleeding, Darren tells one of the cops, "Golly, I guess this is the biggest thing Rowlett's ever seen." It seemed like an odd, inappropriate thing to make at the moment. Darlie asked the cop if any jewelry was missing from the kitchen counter. Apparently she had taken off her rings and stuff and laid them on the counter earlier. Darlie already told the 911 operator that she had picked up the knife, that she had stumbled up and sort of stumbled across the room and seen this knife and picked it up. And she said, "Oh, I probably left prints on it." She told a different version of the story somewhat to the cop who was at the scene. She said that her son woke her because she told the 911 operator she was woken by being attacked. Anyway, she and the other little boy were treated at Baylor University Medical Center, and claims were made where the staff noted that she had no emotion. And we're going to talk more about this, but these are just the narratives that are already being woven here, and we're going to see what the truth is behind a lot of this. At the funeral, Darren said to somebody that he could get $5,000 for each child that had died. 8 days later, the police were putting them under observation, surveillance, and they secretly recorded a family event at the grave of the little boy Devin who had died. He was 7 and it was his birthday, and it's a very famous film. If you watch any crime TV, you've seen it, where they're all standing around the grave and they're spraying silly string. It's important to remember that that film was actually over an hour long, and we saw 60 seconds of it. So 4 days later, Darlie was charged with capital murder, and it was, death penalty because Damon was under 6 years old. Both boys died. The prosecutor made some claims. We're going to go through them now. That the crime scene was staged, that the family dog attacked the cops that came, but didn't bite the intruder, apparently. That Darlie's wounds were self-inflicted. That he portrayed her as a spoiled, materialistic brat, upset at the debt and the potential loss of her lifestyle, and that the children were killed because of financial stress. However, there really wasn't a coherent motive. The finances were not as bad as the picture was painted. She never confessed. There were no witnesses. In fact, she completely denied, it was my dog. She completely denied anything. The family claimed that the gravesite video never showed the very long, solemn, heart-rending ceremony that was held prior to the moment of silly string, and that they were just doing silly string at the end of this very heartbreaking ritual because it was his birthday and they had planned, and you can't imagine. Her lawyer tried to arrange for her to have a private polygraph. They didn't trust the police. She would do a polygraph, but she was going to do one privately, and the police wouldn't allow it. So the truth is that when she came into the hospital, she wasn't deadpan and no emotion or anything. She was hysterical. She was distraught. She was sobbing. She was also physically in shock from blood loss. The medical examiner testified that her injury was 2 millimeters from her carotid artery and not consistent with a self-inflicted wound. And the children, the medical examiner said, were stabbed directly in the heart, which indicates personal anger, according to him. They claimed that there was cast-off blood on the back of her nightdress. And so when you go down here with something to stab and you raise your hand to do it again, it throws blood droplets behind you. That's what they're saying. And there was no blood outside from a fleeing perpetrator. There was no indication that somebody with blood all over him had left the house. They claimed, now we're going to go through these again from a different point of view, so just keep that in mind. The vacuum cleaner that was just sitting in the room was knocked over, and it covered blood spots on the floor, so implying that it was moved after the fact. Her blood was in the kitchen sink, and the drain was superficially rinsed. She doesn't deny, I think, that she bled into the kitchen sink. She was hemorrhaging. The children's, a child's bloody handprint showed up by luminol. That makes you wonder. And one of the socks from inside the house, like a men's sock, was found outside 2 houses down from theirs with blood on it. They claimed that their screen, the guy got in through a screen, but they claimed that the screen was cut. And prosecutors said, well, yeah, it was cut from the inside by a bread knife belonged to the kitchen. So these are all the facts, supposedly, that put her on death row. And she's at the Mountain View unit in Texas. Darren, after Darlie got sent off, Darren lost custody of the baby because he had defended his wife in public. And so social services went after him and took their baby away. Eventually, his parents got custody of the little boy. At one point, it is alleged by somebody that Darren, during this whole terrible thing that night, asked one of the cops, did you see her breasts? So in September of 2011, they got a divorce, and they didn't really want to get a divorce. And 2011, that's kind of a long time, what's that? 15 years? 16 for 20 years almost? No, that's not right. 15 years. He stood by her, but she insisted because he was in sort of a legal limbo, financial, and just his whole life was on hold, and she just finally said, he did remarry. Anyway, there was a post-conviction defense of the errors in the investigation and in the trial. And they took it to court, they appealed, and it was rejected on appeal. In 2008, DNA testing was approved, that they could do it. And eventually, God, talk about justice moving slowly. In 2014, both sides, prosecution and defense, did DNA studies. They did them on the latent adult print in the kitchen in blood. They did it on the bloody sock outside, and they did it on her nightdress. That will come into play, that DNA results. Also, there was evidence of a black car that had been casing the house several times in the day before the crime, and had been seen by other people. There had been a number of local SAs that were break-ins at night, and the perpetrator used an adult sock as a gag. Darlie had huge defensive wounds on her arms, and I would recommend you Google and look at the images. She had bruises. I've never seen anything so extreme of a bruise outside of a major car accident. I mean, it was really, really, really dramatic. And not to mention, she had... so she had these defense wounds on her arms from going like this. What wasn't talked about in trial was that Darren, the husband, had asked an associate about helping to stage a break-in for the insurance money when there was nobody home. Raised some eyebrows. So this next bit of information that I'm going to talk about comes from this 3-hour YouTube video, and I really recommend it. It's long though. I'm going to summarize it so you don't have to watch it, but it's called Darlie Routier's New Evidence Uncovered Behind Criminal Minds, and this lawyer does deep dives and discovers important evidence that may have been overlooked or whatever. So he puts forward arguments. He treats this like he's going to be doing a case, and he puts forward arguments. And these next arguments that I'm going to list would be for the prosecution, could be given by the prosecution. So these are the arguments that say she's guilty. Number one, Darlie, her character. She was vain and materialistic. She demonstrated behavior unbecoming of a mother. Now, this is not, I'm not agreeing with any of this. This lawyer is saying, if he or anybody else were the prosecuting lawyer, these are the kinds of things that they bring up in court. Like it or not, this is how they talk in court. So her character, judged by her appearance and her kind of immature, materialistic behavior. Number two, her statements were inconsistent and appeared to contain evidence of a cover-up. Number three, she failed to provide any medical assistance to the children at the scene of the crime. Number four, law enforcement was unable to find evidence of an intruder. Number five, forensic evidence was found by the state in her home that demonstrated signs of a staged crime scene. Number six, her wounds were superficial, but the boys sustained severe injuries. The state believed that hers were self-inflicted, the state being the prosecutors. They described Darlie as a blonde, big-boobed, greedy woman upset at having a weight gain, that her children were an inconvenience, that took up her time, that she was self-centered and a bad mother. Darlie was neglectful and left her children unsupervised. She let them ride their bikes in the street and didn't make them wear life jackets on a boat. And this is all coming from, meow, neighbors. She claimed that she had claimed that she was a light sleeper, and she was downstairs to get away from the baby, that he had been keeping her up all night, every night, and she'd already had postpartum depression. She was struggling. And it's true, she'd been on medication for weight loss, which, keep that in mind. And she kept being woken up, and so they made an arrangement that night. The boys wanted to watch a movie or something on television, so Darren said, well, I'll take the baby, and you can stay down there with them, and you'll get more sleep with the TV on and the children down there than you would with the baby. So that's how they worked it out. But despite the fact that she's such a light sleeper, she did not wake up when the boys were attacked. That was significant. She made an issue, a point of telling the 911 operator, whoops, I picked up the knife. I left my prints. Her story to the 911 operator was different than the one she made to the cops. She changed her version of what happened 8 times. And she ignored the medical advice that the cops were giving at the scene, you know, like how to do CPR and that sort of stuff. Then the prosecutor had crime scene evidence specifics here. The CSI only spent 20 minutes before declaring that Darlie staged it. The security light that didn't come on in the yard didn't come on because it wasn't turned on. There was no foreign DNA. The dog didn't bark. There were scattered broken items around, and the prosecution claims that it was staged to show that there'd been a struggle. The vacuum cleaner had been pulled down over the blood spots. A knife was left with blood where it was thrown, and, you know, they called it thrown, like maybe, you know, it was set down. There was luminol in the kitchen sink showed evidence of a cleanup of Darlie's blood. There was no blood on the couch where she'd been lying. There were traces of the screen on the bread knife inside the house. The screen had been cut on the wrong side. Nothing was stolen. It's all sounding very damning, but stick around. Nothing was stolen. The emergency room staff reported that she was unemotional, that her wounds were self-inflicted. And her fate was sealed when the prosecutor got her mad. She testified and got her mad, and she yelled, whatever he said, you know, it was inflammatory, defamatory. She yelled, liar, you're a liar. I did not take the lives of my children. And of course that made her look hysterical, woman, right? The lawyer on YouTube did this big, long investigation, and he said, you know, there's a system that comes into play when there's a crime like this, but the system doesn't always get things right. And for example, to support that claim, there have been 193 exonerations of innocent people, and there have been executions of innocent people proven later by DNA that they were innocent. He said she had terrible representation in court. Her lawyers were absolutely terrible, and it turns out there was a reason for it, which we'll get to. They did not defend her well. She started out with a young public defender, and he was doing a great job, according to this lawyer who went over all of the paperwork later. He said he did a really good job defending her. But her family was approached by and talked into hiring a big shot lawyer who was looking for notoriety. So this man who did this video on YouTube made a list of the things that he thought this new lawyer did wrong. He said up until then, her defense lawyer, this young, inexperienced guy, did a fabulous job. Then her family got convinced to hire this big name guy, and things went south. So the first was he failed to request adequate prep time. He didn't have a lot of prep time. This new famous lawyer had 9 weeks, and that's not a lot of time in a capital murder case to go through all the evidence and make a persuasive argument. And according to our YouTube lawyer here, it was arrogant. He basically said publicly, I don't need, I'm so great, I don't need time. And the average prep time for a capital murder case is 18 months. This guy supposedly did it in 9 weeks. 18 months. And that's the average. So some people take longer. There was a failure to report the state's expert testimony. So they had testimony that, like depositions or evidence or whatever, that never made it into court. The first public defender had 2 experts who supported her claim of an intruder. They later provided affidavits when there was the appeal, but her defense lawyer, the big shot, never used their evidence. So these 2 experts, hired by the original young lawyer, said there were numerous pieces of evidence that indicated this was not a staged scene. The vacuum cleaner was not pushed over by a person with blood on him. They said you could tell that it was just lying there on the ground, and somebody bleeding walked by, and they tried to make a story out of something, and it wasn't true. There was a broken wine glass in the kitchen. They made a big deal about it being there, and these experts said that also wasn't true. It was broken, yes, but it wasn't broken to stage a crime. It was broken in the rack that it was in. Scientific testing critical to the defense, to help the defense, was never done. The critical testing that needed to be done to refute the holes in the state's case against her. Expert shopping is rampant, and in this case it was really bad. Prosecution experts were willing to support any prosecution theory for money. And he just plain comes out and says, you get all the justice that money can buy. And that's what happened in this case. Her new lawyer put no experts on the stand at all to contest the state experts. So the state had experts, and this lawyer just ignored the original lawyer's work and did not do any of his expert testimony of his own. Then our YouTube lawyer says there was an attorney conflict of interest. He said the public defender originally believed that Darren did it. Darren had asked people to help him stage a robbery in the house for money. This has been proven. Darren had taken out I can't read my handwriting. A $4 million life insurance policy on Darlie. The new lawyer didn't like this theory because he needed to continue to be supported by Darren's family. And he needed them to stay supportive of his being the defense lawyer. So he didn't even consider challenging Darren's role in this, and never reviewed the evidence that Darren may have been involved. The evidence that the first lawyer actually had put together. He had assembled a case, an argument for this. The new lawyer warned Darren about the theory that he did it, and he said that he would not implicate Darren if Darren kept him hired, and so Darren agreed. I thought that's just unbelievable. The public defender protested. The public defender was like, well, wait a minute now. And so what happened was, let's just go back a bit and make this clear. She was assigned a young public defender who was inexperienced, and he was doing a fabulous job. And he put together a case at the beginning. He was working on this, and he had evidence accumulated that Darren was involved. Darren was into it. It was an insurance scheme. And Darlie wasn't involved. It was her husband. And this big shot lawyer approached the family and convinced Darren and his family, who had money, to please hire him instead. And if you hire me, we won't pursue the fact that you might have done it. It's basically what was said. And, this young and inexperienced public defender protested, but it didn't do any good. The prosecutor was concerned that this was a conflict of interest. The prosecutor was horrified, right? But it was a very uncommon and unusual situation, but nothing came of it. The prosecutor, also believed that Darren was involved by participating, in the murder, and he believed the defense attorney was keeping evidence of Darren's involvement keeping it hidden. And what was this evidence? Let's talk about what this was. His hair was on the knife, so, it was his house. The blood-stained sock in the yard was Darren's, and they knew this for a fact because it had fibers from his shoes, his own personal shoes, on the sock. He made inconsistent statements about the blood on his jeans. He also had blood on his underwear, so he had blood all over him. He made inconsistent statements and had suspicious behavior at the crime scene and at the hospital. The second big shot defense lawyer ignored all of this. Darren later swore on an affidavit that he did try to get people to rob the house for insurance money. 2 years previously, he had arranged to get his Jaguar stolen for insurance money and did it successfully. There was a failure to counter the state's character attacks. This was a big one. I mean, they pretty much convicted her to death row based on fake boobs and dyed blonde hair. Really and truly, when you read about the things that were said about her in the papers and neighbors and books, it's pretty astounding. The justice system was an echo chamber that assumed guilt based on she was that kind of woman. Rules got broken. The prosecutors are not allowed to talk to the jurors about the character of the defendant. That can't be used as an argument in a court of law, but they did, and the judge allowed it. So it's prosecutorial misconduct to argue this thing, that she had a propensity for doing something self-serving because she was, lint. Because, oh my God, that drives me crazy. Because she was shallow, narcissistic. And you can't try a defendant on faulty or problematic character. You need evidence of the crime. So there were many clear violations in this prosecution. The prosecutor called her self-centered, materialistic, cold enough to murder her own children. The prosecutor said in an argument in the court, "We sat through 4.5 weeks seeing the evil displayed before us by the name of Darlie Routier. She is not like us. We are dealing with the principalities of evil." That's religious, right? A delegate sits among us right now. Her name is Darlie Lynn Routier, which, pretty unbelievable. So this is the equivalent of prosecutorial misconduct. This is like an official error, law error in court. You can tell I'm not a lawyer. Okay. This is characterized, she was characterized as being an abusive mother because she yelled at her children. You have to get into a very long line. And even if someone admitted that they were guilty, this sort of attack on character and behavior would not be allowed in court. Scolding or yelling at your children is not germane to this crime. Interesting little tidbit: the religion of a jury cannot be weaponized against the defendant, and the prosecutor used very inflammatory comments, calling her a principality of evil. So character attacks should not be allowed, and especially not from a religious point of view. And this is what would be called unethical, willful violation of the rules of criminal procedure and ethics. It's a formal characterization. She was asked if she regularly took her kids to church. It's a Bible Belt, right? And the jury was very much that way. So when she's being asked by the prosecutor, if you take your children to church regularly, what the jury hears is she's immoral, and therefore she has to be a murderer. But this is not evidence. This is not arguing evidence. This is not presenting proof. This is discussing character. And the defense never objected to any of this, so it's poor defense. And then the defense never presented any evidence for reasonable doubt. They didn't even attempt to make a case for reasonable doubt. That's what you're supposed to do, you know. So the question remained, how did Darlie sleep through the attack on her sons? So I think I'm going to end this here, and I'll be back. I'll be back in the next, maybe even tomorrow, and do more. I don't want to make this so long. I hope this is an interesting case for you, and it does become quite a bit more interesting. So stick around, Slongafoil. Thank you for watching.